Good morning, vinyl community. I'm here to read a chapter out of my Nick Schreck book. It's called Famous Mobsters of Filmland. If Sebring shed any tears over JFK's dramatic passage, the new playmate he met at a Thanksgiving party held at the Whiskey A Go-Go nightclub impresario Elmer Valentine helped him get through his morning. Valentine started out as a cop and bodyguard in Chicago, the mob's kind of town. He also had intelligence connections acquired when he served as security for David Ben-Gurion, the Italian prime minister. As mentioned earlier, Valentine told me about the night when I first met him in the late 70s. Steve McQueen's date at the Whiskey was a 22-year-old Dallas-born beauty named Sharon Tate. The author, Joe Hyneman's, had been on the fringes of Humphrey Bogart's original Rat Pack, introducing Sebring to the girl McQueen had brought with him that night. Some say he admitted her from an earlier encounter and told Hyneman's he had to have her. Soon, Sebring found himself sharing an amount of cocaine with Sharon. It was love at first snort. The instant attraction wasn't lost on Cammie, Sebring's current wife. During her husband's liaison with Tate, Cammie separated from Sebring and eventually divorced him, a decision that may have saved her life. A week after the party at Valentine's, Sharon joined Sebring on a sailing holiday, during which Sebring and Steve McQueen shared her. A couple of months after they met, Sharon and Jay announced their engagement. A bond forged between Valentine, Sebring, McQueen, and Tate would only play a significant role 6 years later on the evening of August 8, 1969, and in the days afterward. Sebring's friend and client, Steve McQueen, who remained Tate's sometimes lover, was a regular at stellar parties Sebring held. After a drug-ravaged McQueen died of cancer in 1980, his former wife, Nellie, recalled that Jay was the person who introduced cocaine into their household. But these two had much more in common than cocaine: Sharon Tate and the boyish love of fast cars and racing tracks. If I hadn't been an actor, said McQueen, I would have been a criminal. Like Sebring, but a far more serious level, McQueen started out as a juvenile delinquent street kid, quick to anger and fighting. Maltreated by an abusive stepfather, the young McQueen was rejected by his mother. He made him a ward of the California Junior Boys Club Republican Chino. Then he spent a grim adolescence similar to Manson's institutionalized youth. Like Sebring, McQueen escaped from petty crimes into the military as a teenager. He spent a lot of time in the brig of disciplinary offenses. He picked up a beat sensibility in the Greenwich Village of the 50s. Then he introduced to a pot he smoked for the rest of his life. The New York Hell's Kitchen, he fell in among junkies, thieves, and counterfeiters. Shortly thereafter, McQueen began taking the acting lessons that led him away from the outlaw life he had been headed for. After his 1966 Broadway debut, he landed on his own TV series, Wanted, Dead or Alive, in 1958. But even after his success, he preferred the company of the kind of people who really do and end up wanted, dead or alive. By the time he met Sebring, McQueen was already an enthusiastic connoisseur of all kinds of highs. Sebring introduced the actor to the use of amyl nitrate during orgasm, a trick McQueen first tried with Mammy Van Doren in Sebring's bedroom. Long before the hippies came along, McQueen traveled to the desert to imbibe peyote brewed by the local Indians. His wife reported that their Brentwood home was filled with hiding places for the stash in order to conceal the drug use from their hired help, and he feared that he would squeal to the press of the police. Later in 1968, the bohemian outlaw tendencies made McQueen sympathetic to the counterculture and established values, so much so that he first turned down the role of policeman in his hit movie Bullet. No way am I playing a cop, said McQueen, objected. These kids call them pigs, man. Ironically, it was well known that advocate of law and order Jay Sebring was ultimately convinced the actor to play his most famous part. According to Nellie McQueen, the decision was made at Sebring gave McQueen a haircut while both men were high as kites. Sharon Tate's mentor, Marty Ramoshoff, recalled McQueen as a haunted man who would call him in the middle of the night to ramble about his anxieties. He was then, Ramoshoff said, the evil would come out. It was as if some devil had grabbed hold of him. Just as Tate would have passed on without drama from Sebring to Polanski, so it would have been 3 years earlier with their amicable transfer from McQueen to Sebring. I found Sharon to be nice and totally guileless, McQueen's wife Nellie noted when Sebring took over. She seemed willing to do anything Jay asked her to do. Among these things Jay and Sharon did together was acid. The interesting was already sparked in Tate by McQueen, who had claimed to have been one of the first people to bring LSD into London. McQueen, Nellie, Jay, and Sharon dropped acid together just as the LSD craze was taking off. During the late 60s, however, McQueen's wife was alarmed by the massive amount of grass and coke her husband went through. She seemed to find a drug connection everywhere, she recalled. She often nursed the actor through week-long coke binges that made him paranoid and violent. When he became a strung-out wreck in 1969, Nellie McQueen admitted, I began to resent Jay Sebring's presence in the house. Jay and his damn briefcase. Jay's briefcase with his comb and scissors and a little packet of coke. And with the equally drug-damaged associate, Peter Lawford, Sebring was the police later described as a well-known user of cocaine, staying high on the drug most of the time, bore much of the brunt for McQueen's decline, while Nellie McLean was one of the few Hollywood insiders brave enough to break the unspoken taboo about Sebring's not-so-secret identity as Candyman. She never went so far to reveal the mafia source of Sebring's merchandise. Whether this omission was made out of genuine ignorance or deliberate evasion is hard to determine. But it's from the same source that we've given another telling glimpse into the shady cast of underworld characters floating on the edges of McQueen-Sebring social set. By marrying McQueen, Nellie had been courted in Las Vegas by a persistent but unsuccessful admirer named Johnny Roselli. In her autobiography, My Husband, My Friend, she wrote, when his pursuit failed to elicit the desired response from me, Johnny appointed himself my guardian angel. Johnny, born Filippo Sacco, was the kind of angel who'd been indicted in 1941 for a mob extortion crime which netted over $1 million from the director of Warner Brothers, 20th Century Fox, and Lowe's. That infamous case and his fearsome reputation made Roselli well known even to the general public as one of Luciano Castello Genovese's syndicate most powerful movie industry presenters. Roselli, one of the mobsters in Sebring's circle who were privy in the Maryland JFK tapes, was one of several Genovese's made men secretly recruited by the CIA in their plot to assassinate Fidel Castro. But according to Nellie McQueen, I was not aware that in actual fact he was a high-ranking mafioso until years later when I read a book called The Greenfeld Jungle. The book credited him with killing 17 people. In August 1976, his dismembered body was found stuffed in an oil drum floating in a bay near Miami, just 2 weeks before he was to testify before a Senate subcommittee investigating the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. While this all may seem remarkably naive, it appears that many of the fun-loving showbiz crowd Sebring serviced and entertained really were in the dark about the reality of mob control over Hollywood in the 60s. The majority of the actors, directors, and musicians whose productions were bankrolled by criminal earnings didn't examine the credentials of the businessmen who dealt with the financial side of the things all too closely. How much Sharon Tate herself actually knew about her new boyfriend's backers in the 1963, it's impossible to say, but it's hard to believe that anyone could be quite as clueless, a dumb blonde, as her supposed friends make her seem. Her only mother, Doris Tate, and a few of her actual girlfriends ever spoke openly about Sharon's misgivings about all of the criminal activity going on around her. Fears that came to a head in 1969. The general lack of curiosity about these matters may not be too surprising among entertainers, but the Tate-Sebring relationship does bring a question that's not been sufficiently explored. Didn't Sharon's father, Colonel Paul Tate, a trained intelligence officer, have occasion to wonder how his prospective son-in-law was financing a lifestyle covering several times his apparent income? That quandary certainly captured the attention of the FBI and the Internal Revenue Service. This is a relevant factor in the celebrity drive mystery because Colonel Tate and his wife, along with the Polanskis and the Folgers, actually invested in Sebring International. At least during Sebring's lifetime, the company was one of many fronts of the laundry of mob loot ranked in from Kentucky airport scam. In contrast to his new son-in-law, Polanski, who fiercely disputed any drug connection to the murders, Colonel Tate loudly proclaimed to the press that his daughter's murder had something to do with their narcotics trade, a suspicion which led him to use his Army intelligence training to go undercover among the hippie scene on the Sunset Strip. He donned groovy threads and adorned himself with a long-haired wig and beads and went underground. The operation ultimately led nowhere, but it received a lot of publicity for what it was supposedly clandestine endeavor. Colonel Tate's adventure was inspired Paul Schrader's film Hardcore, adapted to a fictional tale of a concerned father trafficking his missing daughter, descent into the sleazy world of Hollywood crime and porn. In the early summer of '69, before the murders complicated things, the federal investigation into the East Coast mob scam, whose traces trickled into Cielo Drive, revealed a matter of concern to the Pentagon. Among the mail clutched by mafia hands were sensitive documents relevant to the top-secret U.S. weapon system. Conspiracy buffs often mistakenly identified Colonel Tate as CIA. But for this regard, it's important to remember that he actually worked for Army intelligence, a branch of the government directly responsible for looking into such mischief. And when we delve deeper into the intelligence aspects of the case, which this matter is missing in confidential papers brought about, it has all become apparent why at least some aspects of Tate's supposed private investigation may have been ruse. In 1963, at any rate, such concerns have not yet arisen. Sharon and Jay stuck their friends at the perfect couple, the smattering of Italian, the starlet picked up overseas during yet her youth would charm Sebring's many old world business contacts from the Genovese Combine, and it would presume that an Army intelligence officer's daughter could be trusted to keep Sebring's many trade secrets. The clincher was that Sharon didn't object to being tied to Sebring's bed and whipped as long as free drugs kept coming. She was promptly installed as the hostess of Sebring's bashes, contrary to later rumor, so that when Tate's reputation of orgiastic druggie and party girl began at the time of her later marriage to Polanski and still every bit the hedonist, she'd actually calmed down considerably. And during the 8 months of her pregnancy that preceded the murders, she appeared to have abstained from most of the pleasures that had once occupied her. In 1966, Sebring's actress of Hollywood's hair guru earned him the ultimate pop culture accolade of that period. A guest spot on the campy TV sensation Batman, he was cast as society hairstylist Mr. Ocean Brain. Those fancy salon in the scene of a cartoon-style pow, bang, and zap fight sequence between Catwoman, thief, henchman, and Caped Crusader. This quaint Candyman versus Catwoman comic book crime cameo must have been a gas to choose in the crowd who knew the open secret of Sebring's own underworld pursuits. Sebring dated Julie Newman, the statuesque actress who played Catwoman in the series. Sebring, self-conscious of his puny physique, was ever in search of his He-Man activities. He took martial arts lessons from a yet unknown Bruce Lee. Sebring introduced Lee to Batman's producer, who cast the Kung Fu Master in another superhero series, The Green Hornet, which kicked off his show business career. 3 years later, Bruce Lee would be one of Hollywood's figures Roman Polanski claimed to have seriously suspected of killing his wife. As with the recently revealed implicating evidence into Phillips referred here for the first time, the not all surprising confirmation in 2021 that the rumors of Bruce Lee's serious drug abuse problem were true can only cause us to wonder what Polanski knew about Lee's connections to the international narcotics trade. We now know for certain, thanks to a cache of private letters in Lee's own hand, he was being regularly supplied with cocaine, LSD, and cannabis from 1969 to 1973 by his associate, Robert Baker. Only the most starry-eyed innocent can still deny that Lee's close friendship with Sebring wasn't also based on hairdressers' really access to those highs. As Sebring's star rose, he and Sharon shacked up in style in the magnificent love nest suited to their status as swinging couple par excellence. Sharon lived there with him until the mid-1966. The estate was just a hop and a skip away from Cielo Drive House, in which they would be later killed, which brings us to the second celebrity, suicide, whose secrets Sebring delights in sharing with his friends. It was much closer to home than the Maryland murder, his own home. In fact, that's the home of Paul Byrne. So I want to show a couple records real quick. There are things I'm talking about, so I might as well show the records. Here's the controversy, the deathbed testimony by Lawrence Schiller. The deathbed testimony, Jack Ruby's own account of the killings of Lee Harvey Oswald. Hear the voices of President John F. Kennedy, Lee Harvey Oswald, Congressman Gerald R. Ford, authors Mark Lane and Edward J. Epstein, and 9 other witnesses to the assassination. I made a short of this, and it got like 5 views. So here's a real pretty lady there, the pajama game with Doris Day. As you can see, there's the thing right there. What's that say? Yeah, it's a 6-star Columbia Masterworks. 6-star Columbia Masterworks in excellent condition, huh? Terry Melcher's mommy, huh? Yeah, Terry Melcher had a problem, so the mommy called Ronnie Reagan up and got her little boy out of trouble. Okay, well, everyone in the vinyl community, the crime community, have a nice day, and we pay for all these families and children.